the way to use sound is to get to a quiet place where the chatter's gone, to find that place of stillness where we know this is happening, and to allow intuitively a sound to issue forth out of that place, which should be very close to your fundamental frequency. Because ultimately, the fundamental frequency should be the easiest resonation of your vocal cords when they're most relaxed, which they can only be when you're in this state, right? A state of zero stress in the system, the state of ultimate safety, where I feel completely safe and okay to open up all my doors and windows and feel free to be able to do that and know I'm not threatened by anything. When I'm in that place, if I decided to make a sound from the most relaxed I can be, that sound must be very close to a homeostasis state automatically. It's just that we've gone so far down the wrong pathways for generations and generations that we've so profoundly lost our touch of that place that we now have to rely on external science and technologies like the heart rate variability to see what frequency makes this place so we can artificially sort of, find out what it is.
Welcome to the Mindful Injury Recovery Talks with Dr. Maya Novak. Your host is a mindful healing expert and the author of the book, Heal Beyond Expectations, and this show is here to give you the extra resources you need when healing from any physical trauma. Tune into today's episode to get inspired and empowered. And before we start, here's a little known fact about Dr. Maya. Jazz ballet, Argentinian tango, ballroom and Latin dances are just a few styles that she's been enjoying ever since she started dancing at the age of 3.
Sounds, vibration, healing, all of this and more in today's episode. I'm joined by Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, who is a brainwave entrainment expert, composer, and musician, and one of the world's top researchers of the healing properties of sound. He's been pioneering this field since the early 80s, and he's one of the stars in the incredible documentary Heal. He's the founder and director of the Center of Neuroacoustic Research in Carlsbad, California, where he both helps people with his wellness methods and teaches other professionals how to apply them. One of his biggest achievements is the biotuning modality, a scientifically proven method that allows to identify an individual's core frequency and use it to amplify the potency of sound to help heal the body, heart, mind, and spirit. Dr. Jeff, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to feel good about yourself, just look at your CV. If you look at what you've done in your life, it actually looks good on paper. I mean, I guess if you're around long enough to have gray hair, then you've probably done at least a few things right, or you wouldn't be above ground. But
Absolutely. And I think that I could talk more about your CV, but I would like to give you the opportunity, especially because we're going to be talking about sounds and healing. So how, when, and why did you become interested in healing with sound?
Well, that's actually an involved and crazy story, which we don't have enough time for. But to make a long story short, I've always been a musician since I was a kid. I always naturally drawn to anything that could make music or sound. I was also really good as an artist, so I was drawing all the time and doing stuff like that. I actually have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. I went to art school, a full-on 4-year college of all kinds of fine arts and sculpture and stuff like that, and actually had some businesses for a while. And then my best friend and his brother went to chiropractic school and started working on his brother, who was my best friend, who started working on me. Wanted me to come out to Iowa. I was living in New York at the time, up in New York State. He's working on me. He's going, look, you're a smart guy. We've been into this esoteric search for years and years and years. And everything that you know about sacred geometries and mathematics and esoteric secrets about how the universe is put together, we know that that's reflected in miniature in your body. Your body is a textbook of universal law in miniature. So if you were to go and take anatomy and physiology, medical level anatomy and physiology courses, you would flesh that out to a level that you just don't understand right now. Like if you really learned the wiring diagram of the brain and how the cells are put together and how the whole system is really laid out to its nth level of detail, down to an atomic and subatomic level, your understanding of the esoteric sciences that you've been up to this point would catapult into a whole different universe. So that got me interested. So I went out to Iowa, hung out for a week, went to the school, sat in on some classes, just had my mind blown. I got it. And I came back all ready to go, right? So when I get back, I've got a whole 2-story house that's loaded up with artworks. I was a filmmaker. I had cameras and films and books and blah and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to get all this stuff out to Iowa? And how am I going to afford to do that in first and last month rent? And what kind of a job how am I going to support myself? And I'm talking myself out of it. And I sort of believe that there's this celestial council of elders assigned to each one of us. Right. And they're up there going, he's talking himself out of it. What are we going to do? So their solution to my problem was to burn my house down.
Okay.
And all my films and my cameras and my musical instruments and all the artwork I'd ever done, all burned and turned to ash. And the result of that was some insurance money, which made it possible for me to go to Iowa and afford whatever I needed to make that happen with no problem. And I could travel light. So I sort of was drafted for this job. This was sort of a choice I was talking myself out of, but fortunately for me, higher forces stepped in. And that's sort of been the story of my life. Those kind of weirdo experiences have been things that have happened to me on a regular basis over the decades, one thing after another. When I'm in doubt and that doubt goes for too long, then the circle of elders steps in, and sometimes it's not so pretty. So I started to, every time I started to get proud of myself and patting myself on the back about what a great genius I am, I realized that I'm actually pretty dense and stupid. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to gone to such extreme measures to keep me on the right path. If you know what I mean. So part of it is my own genius. I mean, each one of us is a genius in our own world. You're a genius when you step into what you're here for successfully.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when you get the glimpse of that and you actually do it and you step into it, then you have the right to be proud of that moment. That was a moment of genius and a moment of courage, mixed with a bit of stupidity because you really didn't know all the possible negative consequences of your actions. But so, for instance, there was another example. Well, so I go to chiropractic school and I graduate and I'm in practice. And once again, I land a dream job of all time. I land a job in the largest holistic health center in Virginia, and where we're just doing all the most cutting edge holistic techniques that are under the roof. And it was in that context that I decided that for the first time in my life, I'm making some serious money. I'm a doctor. I'm a young doctor. I got a big clinic. So I go down to the bank and get my first bank loan to outfit my spare room with a recording studio and the top-notch equipment of the day, electronic keyboards and reel-to-reel professional recorders and mixing boards and racks of equipment to make my first album as a musician, as a composer. I always wanted to make an album, and I'm going to do that, even if I give them away for birthday presents.
So was this a part of that So an album in regards to healing, or was it just
Not yet.
music that
It was
was
just music. And the music that I make is the kind of music I made and I wanted to make was the kind of music that puts you into an altered state, sort of like a mushroom trip with music. That's what I wanted. That's what I was most interested in. And so I got all the equipment to do that. And then my wife at the time wanted me to work on her back because, oh, that's right, I'm a chiropractor. And so I pop up my portable table in my spare room like I always do. And I put her on the table. And all of a sudden I realize I've been set up again, set up by my circle of elders. I've got a patient on a table in a recording studio.
so let's do something with
And
this.
so all of a sudden I'm thinking, I wonder if I could make a chiropractic adjustment with the sound wave, because each vertebra is a different shape, density, and mass, like a wine glass. And I should be able to test for a frequency for an individual vertebra and make it resonate. And so I did that with her, and I put a speaker on her back, and 2 minutes of sound in her low back fixed it. So that little decision of I wonder if was one of the biggest doors I ever opened that changed everything in my life. I didn't realize how big it was at the time, but I really can trace it all back to that moment when I had that little thought. And then I
Thank
brought it back to
goodness
the clinic.
for your wife to be on that table with back
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah. So now I brought that to the clinic, which is this huge holistic health center. I was seeing 40 patients a day, and that turned into a whole project that eventually led to finding frequencies for individual organs and meridians and all kinds of things. But the upshot of that was if I can find a frequency that resonates an individual organ and returns its function to normal, then what about the brain? The brain's an organ. What does that organ do? Well, part of that organ tells everybody what to do, right? It's the one organ that's different than all the other organs because its job is to tell all of the other ones what to do, receive feedback.
Am I understanding correctly that then we start with the brain, we calibrate this, and then the brain will do its job and heal the body? Am I understanding
Yeah.
this correctly?
Yes, because this brings a whole series of different ideas together in the same place. When I had that idea, it was sort of a revelation type of idea because it tapped into the core belief system that I was working with as a holistic doctor. And it sets apart the core difference between the two big camps of allopathic modern medicine and holistic practice, whatever technique you're using. Holistic doctors tend to collect techniques and stack them together and use a bunch. So the core difference is a holistic viewpoint views the body as having a organic biological intelligence that knows how to grow my body out of two cells, read the blueprint, differentiate all the tissues and make them grow into what I am now, and then make all of that function automatically under the hood without me having a clue what's going on up here. My rational thinking mind, my personality, who I think I am, doesn't have a clue. When I was going to school and I'm learning the anatomy and the physiology, all the muscles and all the joints and all the ligaments and tendons and all the nerves and the wiring diagram of the brain. And I mean, it just went on and on and on in a depth you can't believe, plus biochemistry and physics and all of that. The way I got through that was by illustrating it. I took my strong point. I'm an artist. If I could draw it, it was burned in my brain. And then other students wanted those drawings to help them study. So pretty soon I'm publishing them and I'm putting myself through school as a medical illustrator, making study guides for anatomy and physiology. So you never know what's going to happen to you, right? However, if you always play to your strong points, you're close to the path that the universe has set forth for you. The path to find out, why am I unique? What's different about me than anything and everything else and everybody else that's ever existed or whoever will exist? What's the unique talents that I have that the universe has created me for?
Yes. Yes. May I ask you? So, this sound healing, some people also describe it as vibrational medicine. And you
Yes.
slightly talked about this with the experience with your
Yeah.
wife. So, would you agree that this is vibrational medicine?
Yeah.
And how does it then work?
But vibrational medicine encompasses more than just sound. So, first of all, we have to understand when I went to school, and I think it's still what's taught in school now, is that everything in the universe is on the electromagnetic spectrum. It's all got to do with photons and E equals mc squared and light, speed of light, and all that stuff, right? And those charts tend to have increasing speed of vibration. So way down at the lower corner is television and radio, and it's getting faster and faster, and pretty soon it's X-rays, and then it's color frequencies in millions of cycles per second, and then it's gamma rays and cosmic rays, and right, that's everything is made of that stuff. Except that's not true. There is one thing in the universe, and only one thing, that is not on the electromagnetic spectrum, and that's sound. Sound is not electromagnetic, and it's the only thing that is. So in reality, what we've got is a universe that's a big yin-yang, electromagnetism and sound. Except sound is not really the right word, because sound only governs the realm of vibrational frequencies between 20 and 20,000 hertz. And the vibrational frequencies I'm talking about, and what sound is composed of, what sound is pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency. The medium is air or a gas, water or a fluid, and a solid. That's why they say there's no sound in space, because it's a vacuum. Except now we know that's not true. It's not that there's no sound in space. There's no air molecules in space to transmit the pure energy vibration from one place to another. But now we understand that the vacuum of space is not a vacuum at all. It's an extremely super subtle substance that nobody knows what it is. And in the old days, it used to be called the ether. And then that got tossed out with Einstein's Nobel Prize of electromagnetism. And then all kinds of problems have happened in science since that day, because the numbers don't add up unless you put the substance back. And so they put the substance back, and they call it dark matter, dark energy. They don't want to call it ether, because that would admit that they made a mistake the first time. So they got to make a new name. But there's something there. And so if we dig down into that, so we can understand the origin of vibrational medicine, because light frequencies and electromagnetism is also vibration, but it's vibration of photons. And in the sound world, it's phonons. A phonon is the smallest atomic particle of sound, just as a photon is the smallest particle of light. And those particles resonate and vibrate at certain frequencies. And that's what all the atoms of the periodic table are, is photons resonating at different frequencies that appear to be solid, but it's not. So for
would you
instance,
then say, yeah, please?
go ahead.
What I wanted to ask is, so would you say then, when we are talking about either disease, or when we are talking about healing injuries, and there are complications, and potentially bones are not healing well, soft tissue is not healing well, would you say that there is then this balance in vibration, and if we get this right, things can speed up or just miraculously, quote unquote, get better?
That's one aspect. It's not all that. It's a bit deeper. So let's go through this thing where I'm sitting here in front of you, and I've got a body, and my body is made of 300 trillion cells, and biochemistry and all the rest. And the cells are made of biochemical compounds. The compounds are made of atoms assembled together in a certain way. And the atom is the smallest particle of matter that can still be defined. For instance, the smallest particle of gold is a gold atom, an atom of gold. So the word atom means smallest particle that still retains its identity. Below that level, it's not gold anymore. It's just protons, electrons, and neutrons. They haven't accumulated into some pattern yet that we'd identify as gold. And there turns out to be 100 and some odd patterns of how atoms can arrange, of how protons, electrons, and neutrons can arrange themselves into a pattern that we call gold or oxygen or carbon or whatever. Below the level of the periodic table, I call that the periodic table, I look upon that as a wall. It's the wall that separates Newtonian physics that governs everything we look upon as normal function in this world, where apples drop out of trees and hit people on the head. We've got gravity. We've got time that goes in one direction only. You're over there, I'm over here. We're separate things. The universe is made of things that obey certain laws. Newtonian physics, Newton. Those laws disappear on the other side of the periodic wall. Because as soon as the smallest particle of matter that this whole world is made of falls apart into just protons, electrons, and neutrons, we have books of information made of paragraphs, made of sentences, made of words, made of letters, and now all we've got is letters. Right? Protons, electrons, and neutrons are letters. They haven't been assembled into anything yet that spells something. So the laws that govern the letters is the quantum realm, where the rules are very weird and different than what we experience out here. And the rules that govern that realm is the foundation of the rules that govern the assembly into the periodic table that governs this and you and me. So in reality, if my cells are made of compounds, are made of atoms, and atoms are made of smaller parts, and I split those open, take a proton and split it open, it's made of smaller parts. And if I, quarks and charms, I break those apart, and I've got smaller parts. I break those apart, I've got smaller parts, leptons and hadrons and leptons and Z particles and on, big atom smashers, Eventually, I break the smallest part open, and there's nothing inside except energy in a state of vibration, forming standing waves. And a standing wave is a funny phenomenon where something looks solid, but it's not. Something is vibrating repetitively, always coming back to the same place at the same time, and pretty soon that persists and looks like it's solid. So it's like the sand particles on the metal plate with the sound wave making the plate vibrate. And you see the sand particles form these patterns, mandala patterns. And if I twirl the dial and change the frequency, the pattern morphs around and forms a new pattern. So every frequency has a pattern that goes with it. That's sort of what it's like by analogy in the quantum field. Once you've broken the smallest particle open and you look down inside, all you see is an infinite field of patterns forming standing waves. And that's what those lines are in the sand. Those are standing waves. They look solid, but when you look really closely, it's just dancing sand particles. There's no real line there, right? So it's the same in the quantum field. It looks like there's patterns, but when you look closely, the patterns are not made of anything. They're vibrational patterns of dark matter. Something is there vibrating and forming standing wave patterns, but we can't measure what it is because it's too subtle. We know it's there because we can see its effect on the first order of standing waves that look solid. But when you zoom back far enough, those standing waves coalesce together into a larger standing wave that looks solid, and those all zoom back, form a larger standing wave that looks solid until you've got a person, until you've got a cell. And right, so that means everything is based on vibration. And some of those vibrations are sound and some of them are electromagnetism, right? When we deal with sound, pure energy moving through a medium, once we go out of the range of 20 to 20,000 hertz, it's not technically sound anymore because sound only refers to this little thing that we made for that spectrum. So if it goes below, we have a new organ we created to measure that, and that's our skin, the largest sense organ we've got. vibration sense. 4 skin sensors buried under your skin that are sensitive to vibration frequencies. And across all 4 of them, the total range is 0.3 hertz to 500 hertz. That's what the physical body considers to be vibration sense, touch, sensation, and it goes through the posterior spinal cord into neurons in the brainstem before it crosses over. So a separate system. And that's why I developed this sound table and sound chair to deliver low frequency vibrations within that range to activate this system.
So it's
Headphones,
actually vibration that we can hear, or is it just vibration that potentially we cannot hear, but something is happening beyond what we
you can
can
feel it.
perceive with our ears?
You feel it in your body. There is a zone of overlap. So hearing is 20 hertz to 20,000. Vibration is 0.3 to 500. So there's an overlap between 20 hertz and 500 hertz where I hear it and feel it at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the sound table sound chair is designed specifically to deliver, is that frequency range, so I can activate this system. At the same time, I'll have headphones on that activates the hearing system of 20 to 20,000 hertz. And if I compose sounds and music that have a predominant range of instrumentation between 20 and 500 hertz, I synchronize both those systems in the brain. I synchronize vibration sense and hearing.
So is it, you are talking about this chair that you are using? Is there a possibility in the future, and maybe this already exists, I don't know, is it possible to actually get like a, I don't know, like a roll of something that you can lay down in your home and listen to something? So for example, if people are unable to come and see you because maybe they're completely on the other side of the world, is in the future possible that we're going to have something like this at home that you can order online, being shipped, and then you are laying on some sort of, I don't know,
Yeah, I
like a
mean,
yoga mat or something?
a mat is something we've been trying to accomplish now for 30 years, but the technology only recently has started to exist to be able to do that, because a mat needs to be thin, and the technology of transducers requires the transducers to be of a certain minimum size to create a low frequency. That size is 6 inches in diameter and weighs about 5 pounds. So it's a big thing, and you need 4 of them, and it's too big and heavy for a mat. If to stick those in there, the mat would have to be like a foot deep, like big and clunky and heavy and weird. Now, new technologies and new materials are making it possible to have smaller transducers that can still produce a low frequency. The reason that's a problem is because sound waves have size. Most people don't realize that, but if you look at that sort of grand piano behind me there, if I hit C sharp in the second octave down towards the left of the keyboard, if I C sharp in the second octave has a sound wave that's 1 foot long. C sharp an octave lower than that, an octave is 1/2 the frequency or double the frequency. So if I play C sharp an octave lower, then that sound wave is 2 feet long. An octave below that is 4 feet long. That's why low frequencies are so hard to create soundproofing, because it's so big it goes right through the wall. But the size of the sound wave you want to create has to be a mathematical function of the diameter of the plate that's moving in the speaker. That's why when you buy speakers, the bass part of the speaker is a big, round, huge, that because it has to produce a sound wave of a certain size for you to hear it or feel it as a low frequency. So the smaller the diameter, the higher the frequency, and the low frequencies just drop off. You can't produce them because it's not large enough to create a. Technology is changing that, and that's always part of our research lab, trying to make improvements and accomplish exactly what you're saying. Like right now, we've got a sound table, sound chair, and there are a certain price that is too expensive for half the people or the majority of people out there. So we're always trying to come up with something that could do exactly what you're saying.
So, am I understanding correctly that the best combo is if you are on the table and chair with headphones and listening? But what about people who don't have this opportunity? Is it then possible what we talked previously, that we start with the brain? So, we are listening to sounds, to vibration through headphones at home and
Yeah.
helping our body to heal?
Yeah. So being in a clinical practice, so I've been in practice for over 40 years. I've seen thousands of people. And at a certain point, when I was at it for a long time and I was doing something strange and different, I get a lot of press. And pretty soon I'm a famous guy. Now I'm officially a public figure. So you should be treating me with a great deal of respect. But the one thing that you see in clinical practice is it's really where the rubber meets the road. Either a person is responding positively to what you're doing or they're not. So it's the real testing ground for any kind of therapy that you might assemble, because either you can have all the nice fancy schmancy talk and you can have all the research projects you want, but if people don't get better, it all means nothing. It's just talk. So that's sort of the arena where you experiment and draw different therapies together, and you do whatever you can for people to get better. And then you're stuck with, I'd say half the people that I've seen over the years have flown in from someplace else. They've flown in from another part of the U.S. or they've flown in from other countries, and they're going to be with me for a few sessions before they fly back, and I'll never see them again. And all of their therapy will, from that point on with sound, is going to be soundtracks I send them, and they listen with headphones, and that's all they've got. And even though a better, deeper, faster would be if I had a sound table and headphones and light glasses, which I haven't discussed, and a bunch of other things that I could do to stack these things precisely together, I have to allow that to drop because of the practicality of reality. They live in another country and they can't afford a sound table, so we do it with headphones. And they get better too. They also get better. So that means that each of these elements that I'm using myself, each of those elements has power to get the job done. So any one of them that I might use, if you didn't have headphones and you only had the sound table, the job would get done. If you only had headphones but no sound table, the job would get done. And half a dozen other things that I tend to want to stack together. I have to release that because this is that person's story, their karma, my karma. It's nothing you can do about it. It's the way it is. So you deal with it as it is. But this brings me back to a point of the more precisely aligned you can bring to bear different elements that each have power of its own, but perfectly mesh with another therapy, so they work together, amplifies that. And then you add a third one and a fourth one and a fifth one. If the more of these that you can perfectly stack together and align together as treatment forms, eventually, if you stack the minimum number together, you have the possibility of opening sort of the magic door, a new level of healing that's not possible with any one of those separately, but only possible when a minimum number have been stacked successfully together.
So may I ask you what kind of, for example, something that shouldn't be possible to heal? Can you give us an example?
Well, we're talking about at the farthest end, spontaneous remission.
Mm-hmm.
So from a medical standpoint, this person has got stage 4 cancer and they've got 3 months to live, and tomorrow there's no cancer anywhere. And the medical system doesn't have a model in their brain to understand that. The closest they can get is maybe we were looking at the wrong x-rays. Right? No. The reality is that it's a quantum universe, not a Newtonian universe. The Newtonian rules of the universe are an illusion. The quantum field rules is how things actually are. So that means that In the quantum field, things pop into existence and disappear on a routine basis. Things go forward and backwards in time. Two things can occupy the same space. I mean, it's like spooky action at a distance. An atom here will influence an atom's function on the other side of the universe instantaneously outside of time. And this stuff doesn't make any sense in a Newtonian universe. So the concept that my consciousness itself is a vibrational resonance that's also married into the whole network, and my physical form and the physical universe that appears to be solid, we know is not solid at all. It's an illusion. It's an illusion of nested and stacked standing waves that make it look like it's solid, but it's not. We know that from a scientific standpoint. From an emotional standpoint, this all appears to be solid and real. However, spontaneous remission proves to us that if I can go deep enough in my deep unconscious mind, where our collective unconscious mind creates the universe itself and all its rules and regulations, that if I can get into that level of myself, I can make a decision. I can stand up and say, I don't think I'm going to be that person that dies of cancer. It's just not in the mix for me. I mean, I know that to the core of my being. It's just not. I reject that idea, and therefore that makes it so. It's gone. I've stepped into a parallel universe where there's a me with no cancer, or something. It's ultra super powerful. But the question throughout all of time in every culture is, how do I get there? How do I get to that place?
Exactly.
And in that place is where all the healing is, because in that place is the answer of why I'm sick. The mystery of why I'm sick is there. The answer to that is there. And underlying that is the answer to why am I here in the first place? And what am I here to do? What's my path? What's my cosmic path? What's the point of me being here? And ultimately, that question is why I'm sick. So, for instance, we're all fated to walk a path in life, and that path is going to come to a fork. That's our fate. My fate is to walk a path that comes to a fork. And when I reach that fork, my fate is to make a free will decision. Which way? So fate and free will are intimately intertwined together as a yin yang. You can't have one without the other. So my decision of whether I take the right fork or the left fork is now up to me. And the right fork is my heartstrings are pulling me that way. Intuitively, I know that's my path. That's where I should go. That's joy and happiness and alignment with the universe. And that's my dharma. I'll fulfill my purpose if I go that way. But I can't see with my rational mind, how am I going to make that work for me? How am I going to make a living? How am I going to be safe? And all my mentors are whispering in my ear, grow up and get a job. That's the other path, the path of safety that I can kind of see, that if I get a job and a paycheck and retirement, I'll be safe, I'll be okay. But in reality, when I choose the left path and step off the right path, that's where disease begins. That's where the pain starts. And it's the sickness of the soul that has a deep knowledge that I have stepped off the path of my life, the grand heroic journey of all time. And I'm over here in a little circle with some stupid job, working for some stupid idiot in traffic jams every day to and fro. And in my heart of hearts, I know there's no real security or safety there. These guys can fire me tomorrow. That downsize me, right? I've sold my soul to the devil for $1, and I know it.
Would you agree then that accidents and injuries are in a way signs that potentially something is off, and it's a bit of a sign of maybe we have to deal with something?
I believe it's everything that happens to you is that. There's no accidents. It's all part of it. So for me, think of how devastated I was to have my house and all my incredible stuff burn, right? I didn't even have 2 shoes or a toothbrush. And I was absolutely broken, didn't have anything. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I was devastated. It's the worst thing that ever happened in my life. But now I realize it's the best thing that ever happened in my life, because it forced me to go to Iowa and get trained and enter into a whole zone of my path that I was turning away from. All of those things are like that. And as you follow that, it becomes a dance with the universe, where the language of the universe is opening doors and closing other doors. And as I get more adept in reading the language of the universe, where I get better at seeing the doors that are opening and the doors that are closing, instead of the doors are closing and closing, and I'm getting a bloody nose, and I'm still trying to persist with that, instead of thinking, well, maybe that's not the door I'm supposed to be going through. Maybe I should be looking around to see which doors are opening for me. And in the beginning, when I'm sort of new at it, the door has to be wide open, almost off its hinges, before I can see it. And I have to have a good bloody nose and a concussion before I can see the doors are slamming. But pretty soon I can start to perceive when the door is first closing. I already get the red flags. I've gotten better at reading the subtleties of when the door is first closing and noticing when the doors are cracking open someplace else. And I get better at going through those doors so I don't have to have so much pain. It gets more subtle and more subtle as I get good at it. But the bottom line is, the biggest healings that I've seen with people using the sound technology, which I haven't even described yet, but is there will be physical detoxification experiences. There will be emotional detoxification experiences. And there will be self-defeating belief system detoxifications. Physical body, emotional body, mental body. My idea about who I am and what I'm worth has to shift. And when those things align to a certain point, and I'm clear enough of all that baggage, now I can perceive the most subtle of all, which is the spiritual dimension of why I'm sick. And that is this path I'm talking about, where I will eventually teleport back and relive the very first time I chose the left path instead of the right one. Because as a child, I'm choosing the right path, the right path, the right path. I'm following my heart. At some point that closes. I get my first fear. And when I relive that time, in all cases that I've seen, it's based on fear. I'm afraid I don't know how I'm going to make it if I go the right path that my heart is pulling me towards. I'd better grow up and wise up and get a job and grow up and become mature, right? So for me, I'm 75 years old, and I've spent a good portion of my life fighting tooth and claw, working really hard to prevent myself from becoming a grown-up.
So it's really, so when we are talking about healing, it's actually, we kind of have to become a new person, not completely a new person, but we have to let go of some of the things that are not
you have
serving
to
us.
you have to let go of the false person, the
Yes.
person who bought into something and became something that I'm not.
Yes.
That's the part that's sick. And so my first experience with spontaneous remission was this wealthy guy who came to me as a patient when I was still in my first 8 years of practice in Virginia. This guy would come in his big fancy car and all dressed up and bossing everybody around, and then he stopped showing up. And my nurse, who knew everybody in town, started calling around to find out what happened to this guy. He went back for his annual checkup, and they found he had inoperable brain tumor. He was going to die. He had 6 months to live. And I'm thinking, oh, that's why he didn't come back. And then one day my nurse comes in and says, Mr. So-and-so is here to say goodbye. I'm going, oh, I don't want that part of my job. Go say goodbye to this guy. So I go out to the front, and here's this guy. I don't even recognize him. He's got messed up hair, and he's wearing an old T-shirt and some Bermuda shorts with some sneakers. It's like, what? And he's laughing and joking with the front desk people. I come up. I must have been in a state of shock. I mean, he's going, oh, Dr. T, yeah. When I got my cancer death sentence, I decided I better do whatever it is I ever wanted to do in the time I've got left. So what I always wanted to do was buy a boat down in Florida and buy a house on the beach and just take people out on excursions and fishing trips and stuff like that. And that would be my life, footloose and fancy free, and don't have to wear shoes. And so he sold his companies, he sold his home, he sold all this stuff, he disengaged, and he bought himself a house and he bought himself a boat, and he's on his way to Florida. I'm going, wow, good for you. I mean, wow, you know. And he said, yeah, I just went for a checkup last week, and all the cancer's gone. And they're scratching their heads thinking that maybe they looked at the wrong x-rays or something. And I must have had my mouth open because he's going, yeah, that was pretty much my response. And then right on the heels of that, I realized that it really shouldn't be any surprise because I don't need the cancer anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going, whoa, what? Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, that still rattles around in my brain. The reason I'm telling it to you now, it's like never leaves me. This idea that this super wealthy guy who's deeply networked into companies and mergers and highfalutin lawyers and tax accountants and properties and possessions and things and boats, and if he wanted to cash out and move to Florida and take his shoes off and live on the beach and buy a boat, they would have had him committed.
Mm-hmm.
They would have thought he had cracked and he had a problem. He would be talking to psychiatrists, right? And as soon as he got this inoperable cancer, all those same people are now patting him on the back and going, well, you really should go off and do whatever it is you wanted to do with your life when the time you've got left. It's the perfect get out of jail free card.
Mm-hmm.
And once he got out of jail, and all those people said that, and he already bought the boat, he doesn't need the cancer anymore. He had already got out. It's like, wow.
Exactly. So I think for me, how I see this is no matter in regards to what we're talking about, whether it's cancer, whether it's any other disease, whether it's healing injuries, whether it's whatever is happening physically, the basis is still the same. We have to do exactly what we've been talking about. So it's letting go of the part that doesn't serve us, because the body will then start acting differently, healing differently, and then we're going to have this miraculous quote unquote healing that shouldn't happen, but actually it did happen.
I have an accident. I break my ankle. There's no accidents. So why did I create a broken ankle for me? Or why did my circle of elders break my ankle? We need to stop this guy in his tracks because he's walking the wrong path. He needs to stop and contemplate his navel or something.
Yes.
Right? I mean, look at COVID and all the chaos and insanity that happened in COVID. Essentially, the universe said, everybody now has a timeout. Sit in the corner and contemplate your navel. Stop everything. And when you come out of that experience, you're not the same anymore. You're like, you now understand that there is an importance of physical proximity to another human being, to being in a person's energy field, as opposed to a Zoom call like this. You and I were talking, but we've never actually met in the flesh. And there's a constellation, a universe of information that imparts between us by having our energy fields together, not just our consciousness talking to each other. So, when people ask me, what do you do? That's like a really big question. I finally had to come up with an answer for that didn't create, a day-long seminar. It became, and I couldn't say, I'm a sound therapist, because that brings up pictures of Tibetan bowls and toning chakras, stuff like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's not what I'm up to. What I'm doing is I'm using precisely tuned sound frequencies to cause a measurable effect on your consciousness and your brain waves and your master control system that tells all your body systems what to do, the autonomic nervous system.
before we go into this, I would love to go into this. But before we go into this, we talked about hands-on work that we're gonna incorporate into this interview. And one of the idea that you had, and I think it's an amazing idea, is the power of one's voice, own voice, and how we can use that when it comes to healing. Can we talk slightly about this right now?
Yeah, I can't describe it completely without describing what my process is with sound.
Please,
The two of those
please.
marry themselves together.
Yes.
So in a nutshell, we can hook you up to an EEG machine and we can watch your brainwaves. There's something about brainwaves have speeds: beta, alpha, theta, and delta, the big four that I learned in school. But my research institute, we now have identified 21 different brain states that we work with patients. But let's just take the big four. Beta has a speed range from 13 cycles per second up to about 38. That means 13 firings per second of brainwave neurons. But the neurons fire in synchronicity with each other, and they form waves of depolarization that sweep across the cortex. So that's why it's called brain waves. The neurons fire in synchronicity with each other and form a wave. So below 13, between 7 and 13 is alpha, and that's a different state of consciousness. So beta is associated with me talking to you right now, focused attention, goal-oriented, left brain kind of. Alpha is peripheral vision. I can look at you, but I'm actually looking at the peripheral vision. My eyes might be pointed at you, but my vision is out here. And that's alpha function. Beta collapses, alpha expands if I do that kind of activity, or if I close my eyes. Below 7 hertz, 7 firings per second, you're into theta. And theta is where I go when I dream or daydream. Any kind of creative activity happens there. It's where I go in dreaming sleep. That's where emotions get healed, because dreams are emotional things happening to you. Alpha is where the mind gets healed. It's sort of an internalized holographic mental function. Delta is where I'm deepest asleep and most difficult to wake up, lowest heart rate, respiration, body temperature, brain, and that's where physical processes are healed. But each of these different states of consciousness is closely associated with the speed of the firing. Why, I don't know exactly. But it's a vibration. It's a resonance of a certain frequency. So a resonance of a certain frequency of brainwaves equals certain states of consciousness. Then there's the autonomic nervous system. It's the part inside the center of your brain, inside a little zone called the hypothalamus. And inside the hypothalamus, there's these little tiny organelles that all have fancy schmancy names. 2 of those is the origin of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. The 2 branches of the automatic functioning brain that tells all the systems what to do, monitors everything coming in, sends signals back out, governs everything under the hood that I don't have a clue about. And so there's a medical monitoring system that can monitor the autonomic nervous system called heart rate variability. And it's really a gold standard in modern medicine because of its ability to nail your current state of health and predict death by heart attack or by any heavy-duty disease process. You can pretty much very accurately predict how long you've got with heart rate variability. So I have a special version of heart rate variability that I have a patent on. So the medical version of heart rate variability measures the electrical activity of your heart with sensors that go in your wrist or a chest strap. There's a second way of measuring HRV using finger pulse. And finger pulse isn't anywhere near the same because the electrical activity has to have already made the heart squeeze, and the blood goes out in the arteries and makes them expand and contract. And that's what you're measuring after a whole series of things have taken place. EKG is the gold standard. So I have wrist sensors. The medical version of HRV uses the wrist sensors, but it only looks at one aspect of HRV to make this prediction. So the HRV is a snapshot, not a movie, right? International standard is I have to take 190 heartbeats. That's the standard. Then I stop, crunch numbers, pop up screens. For instance, I can predict your current state of health against 66 possible states of health on a graph. And it can watch that move as I do different kinds of therapies. Or I can watch it move into the negative by becoming an alcoholic or a drug addict or abusing myself or whatever. So I commissioned one of these companies to make me a real-time system, because once I've got a real-time system, now I have something kind of like an EEG where I can watch your brain picture respond to my sound waves. Right? So I can use that in brainwave entrainment. I can entrain your brain waves to any state of consciousness I want by exposing you to a sound that's pulsing at a brainwave speed, because of the way my body clocks are timing my brain to the world at large, to pulses in the world at large. Why? To save energy. 2 rules of the body: survive at all costs. When I have a stress response and I think my life is threatened, sympathetic turns on, pulls all the energy from everywhere, puts it in my muscle to fight for my life. Pulls it from my gut, elimination system, immune system, higher brain centers, in my muscles. Kicks my adrenals, raises my blood pressure, raises my blood sugar so I'm extra strong. That's the picture of the fight or flight response. When it's over, it comes back to zero, homeostasis. All the energy drains back into my reservoir, and the autonomic nervous system now works on this never-ending maintenance list of telling all systems what to do, how to organize them, how to synchronize them, how to rebuild tissues. That's my normal state, homeostasis. If I eat food, parasympathetic turns on, pulls all the energy into my gut to digest my food, eliminate toxins. And when that's over, back to zero, back to homeostasis, working on my list. Right. So the HRV, the real-time HRV that I've got, now gives me the ability to see your sympathetic, parasympathetic live on my computer screen. And as soon as I've got that, I've got a better method for telling how healthy you are, how balanced you are. A prerequisite for being able to heal is homeostasis. Survival needs must be met. If I'm running a fight or flight response, no healing can take place. It's been robbed. Clutch has to push in, energy in my reservoir, on my list. And the things on that list are the things that need to be healed. So once I have the real-time system, I can do a simple test. When you're upright, gravity pulls the blood out of your head. Barometric receptors in your carotid arteries signal that pressure drop and raise the alarms. And sympathetic turns on and kicks my adrenals and raises my blood pressure to equalize it, called gravity stress. If I lay you on your back, no more gravity stress, right? So the sympathetic tone that we see when you first lay down should collapse down to zero in 3 minutes. That's normal. So I could do that simple test on every patient who comes in, right? How intact is the autonomic nervous system? And every single person, I beta tested for 6 years. That's thousands of patient visits. Nobody had a normal nervous system. When these people laid on their back, now granted, they're crazy cases because I'm the witch doctor at the end of the trail where they've given up and they're now coming to me. But just statistics would tell me that not everybody can have the same problem. Because when these people lay down, sympathetic is persisting. After 3 minutes, it's not collapsing. It's not going anywhere. It's stuck there. After 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, it's still stuck there. That is devastating because it means that all the energy is pulled from my gut, elimination system, immune systems, and higher brain centers on a permanent basis. And my adrenals are running all the time. That means I've got high blood pressure and high blood sugar all the time. 2 biggest prescriptions in the Western world: blood pressure medication and prediabetes. And the majority of those are incorrect diagnosis. There's nothing wrong with my pancreas. I don't have diabetes. I've got runaway adrenals suppressing pancreatic function to liberate extra glucose to fight for my life. My blood pressure is not my heart. It's nothing to do with my heart. It's my adrenals telling my heart to be faster because I think I'm fighting for my life. So as time went on, I started to realize that if the autonomic nervous system is awry, that is the ultimate cause of disease because the healing program is disengaged. I can't heal. I can't govern the synchronicity of my organs and glands. right? The synchronization of my organs, my glands, my biochemistry, my meridian system, they all have to be synced up all the time for me to be healthy. If this is disengaged and the governing conductor of this orchestra is disengaged, thinking it's fighting for its life, then all these systems begin to slowly drift apart. And as they drift apart, the whole system becomes less effective. And the less effective means my health starts to go down, and alarms all start going off all over the place. Those are symptoms. I go to the medical profession who is doing a whole bunch of tests, but all those tests are looking for pathology. We're not pathologic yet. Right. That's why we've got alarms going off to prevent us from going down the road far enough to become pathological. So I end up with this whole condition. So now I know that, so I can take this sympathetic, this stock, and I can make it push in the clutch with a precisely tuned sound frequency, accurate to a couple of decimal points. I don't know what frequency to use, so I use the heart rate variability to tell me which frequency to use. So I create a sound sweep of all frequencies from 50 hertz to 200 hertz, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, right? Slowly sweeping through the sound table into my body. And as the sound waves are getting closer and closer to like the wine glass frequency for you, you're the wine glass, we're going to sing the note that makes you vibrate, right? As we get closer and closer to that, we can see the autonomic nervous system collapsing at stress in response to that, until the sound waves get to a point where this completely goes zero. And then the computer program I've got will grab that frequency and freeze it and display it for me as 125.256 hertz and a keyboard notation of A sharp plus 23 cents in the third octave. The reason that's important is because the frequency itself is not the be all and end all. It's one of many octaves, because according to acoustic physics, once I ping the wine glass and hear that note and sing that note, the wine glass vibrates. Any octave of that note will also work according to the rule of octaves in the physics of acoustics. All the octaves will work. All the harmonics will work. So it's octave resonance, harmonic resonance, and everything in the universe is set forth that way, including elements of the periodic table. They're all arranged according to music theory, law of harmonics. And you can predict the next atom. You can predict a structure by following the math law of harmonics. So the tone that I'm going to use through the sound table and through the headphones, tuned to this frequency that makes this homeostasis thing happen, now becomes a therapy. And it can be put on some device and you can use it at home with headphones. Now we're going to move this into every day. And every time you listen to the soundtrack, this event happens. And every time this event happens, it becomes stronger to happen, because that's how the body works. It's like going to a gym. You're working a muscle, except the muscle is the muscle of sympathetic parasympathetic balance. Every time we bring it back, it gets stronger for this to be your normal self. And your normal self is a self that knows how to heal itself. So when I've got symptoms and I've got diseases and I've got problems, the real holistic approach to that is that the reason that's happening is because the internal physician program is for some reason unable to do the job it normally does 24 hours a day. It's disengaged from that for some reason. And I believe the disengagement is locked in a fight or flight response it can't get out of. Healing is disengaged. Governing of all my systems is disengaged. Some of the patients I saw, this has been going on for 30 years, 40 years. Now they got cancer. They've got devastating diseases. You bring this back and you put the internal physician program back online. And now it's got this huge list it's got to work on to disentangle what's been happening in the last 30 years. And that list is ordered in priorities of survival at the top. What's my highest need for survival right now? What's number 2? What's number 3? What's number 4 as I untangle this? And in that untangling, that person is going to go through a series of experiences, physical detoxifications. Then I get stronger. Now I can handle the stress of releasing level 1 emotional traumas and level 2 and level 3. Now I'm strong enough to to start to deal with my self-defeating belief systems that are ruining my life. And now I'm at a place of clarity, and most of the baggage, enough of the baggage has been cleaned up that I can deal with the spiritual issues of why I got sick in the first place. The fork in the road idea. The sounds I use in the beginning is a generic sound that I made myself by combining the harmonics of a cello and a flute and a voice. It's a good, healing, generic sound. But to make it better, I take at a certain point when you're balanced enough, I will take a recording of you singing this tone. I'll play this tone for you, and you match your voice to the tone. You sing this tone, and you sing it with an ah sound. It's important to keep your voice steady. Not right? You can't have that in your voice. It has to be smooth and steady tone, and then I can loop that tone so it goes forever. And then I can play it in all kinds of different octaves. And when I slow those octaves down, you can't recognize this as your voice anymore. Now, there's two things about that. Your voice is unique. It's a fingerprint. They call it a sound print, a voice print. It's how a blind person can recognize all their different friends just by the sound of their voice, because your voice has a certain timbre that sounds like you, right? And there's never been a person in all of history that sounds like you or ever will sound like you, because you're a unique event in the universe. It's how the government can tell who's on a cell phone from a satellite. Voice print analysis with a computer. Why your voice sounds like you is because of the harmonics and overtones in your voice, that we can do a spectrograph on your voice in a recording studio, and we can see all the harmonics and overtones. And we can mouse over each one of them and get a number, what the frequency is. And when we look at those frequencies, they're all octaves or harmonic thirds or harmonic fifths or harmonic sevenths, all the stuff that Pythagoras came up with, right? It's what music theory is based on. Harmonic and overtones that make chords that are pleasing. Your voice has that too. As a matter of fact, your whole body and all your tissues have that. The harmonic overtone structure in your voice is everywhere. It's in all your tissues and all your muscles. It's in everything. It's just that we can blow wind across these and do a spectral analysis of it. That means that when I take your voice and slow it down and play it through the sound table into your body, all the harmonics line up. And when it's slowed down, you can't recognize it, except your unconscious mind can. And who in your unconscious mind can? The part of you that designed your body out of two cells that has the answers. We're using it as a trick to gain the attention of the deepest part of my unconscious mind through pattern recognition of the harmonics that it used to design my body.
This is incredible. So now that people are listening to this, I'm guessing that because I have this question, so I'm sure that I'm not the only one having this question, is can we then use our own voice to do something with it on a daily basis that can help us heal better? And what is that? What kind of sounds can we use with our own voice to help our bodies to heal?
Well, so if we take it from the scientific version of what I've just described, we can measure you and can find out what frequency that is, and then have you sing that frequency. And then we can record that. And then when you listen to that every day, it does this thing. But once it's on a recording, you can sing along with that recording. You can match the recording with your voice, and you can chant that to yourself from the inside out while you're listening to it from the outside in. Very powerful. Pretty soon you can memorize that. You don't need the soundtrack. In the distant past, where every culture on earth has used sound as the primo method for changing consciousness or getting to that deep place or enhancing my meditation as a tool, chant was one of those. Mantra was one of those. And at this point, the mantra was more when we were in touch with that part of us, that intuitive part of us that was exercised all the time. So our ancient ancestors had very fine degree of tuning of our intuition and, that subtle sense that we've sort of lost and gotten out of touch with. However, if you meditate and you get to a certain place, a quiet place in yourself, that's where your own chant needs to come from. Your own mantra sound, your Om sound needs to come from. It comes from this place of stillness in you that you arrive at by getting to a meditative state, because we already know that people in high states of meditation have a number of things going on in their body. One is a certain configuration of brain waves start to form, that the right left hemispheres start to synchronize up. That's the aha place. And then my autonomic nervous system goes into this homeostasis state. So naturally, we're wired to be able to go there. The unimaginable marathon of stresses of the 21st century have brought us to a whole different place of stresses that we were never designed to deal with. Your body was designed for a sprint, and we're faced with a marathon. So I think that's the reason why most people's bodies are running this fight or flight response all the time, just to survive the impossible stresses of electromagnetic fields and poisons on my food and 7 o'clock news cycle and traffic jams and stupid jobs. It's abnormal here.
So, am I understanding you correctly that instead of giving right now just a suggestion, do this type of voice and it's gonna help you heal, it's something that we have to find for ourselves through meditation, through that stillness, and we're gonna get the answer what potentially that right sound is for us that will help us with healing?
It's the kind of thing that was taught in the inner circles of the esoteric schools. Esoteric schools had 3 levels. The outer level was the exoteric. The masses would get sort of a general piece of information. Meditation is good. Well, how do you meditate? Well, that's not what we're telling. Chant is good. Well, what's chant? Well, we don't have that information for the masses yet. The mesoteric is the next circle. The priests and the acolytes and the monks and the shamans. They got more information. The esoteric was the inner circle, who passed that knowledge from generation to generation, the ultimate secrets that were too big for the masses to understand. But within that esoteric tradition, the purpose of meditation was to cut through the noise and to arrive back at my true self, the part of me that knows how to grow my body out of 2 cells, and not my personality of who I think I am, who is not me. It's a tool that this big part, the big mind, grew all kinds of tools, arms and legs and fingers and toes, and perceptions and speaking ability, and a mind that can fill out tax forms and DMV and have conversations. But this muscle got worked so often, so much throughout the day, that it muscled up to a point where it thought it was me. And true meditative experiences, this part gets put in its place, and big mind wakes up and realizes I belong in the universe. I'm grown out of the universe. I'm not a stranger. I'm not a visitor. I belong here. It's me. The whole thing is grand me with a capital M, right? It's the Godhood itself. And the way to get there is using sound. And the way to use sound is to get to a quiet place where the chatter's gone, to find that place of stillness where we know this is happening, and to allow intuitively a sound to issue forth out of that place, which should be very close to your fundamental frequency. Because ultimately, the fundamental frequency should be the easiest resonation of your vocal cords when they're most relaxed, which they can only be when you're in this state, right? A state of zero stress in the system, the state of ultimate safety, where I feel completely safe and okay to open up all my doors and windows and feel free to be able to do that and know I'm not threatened by anything. When I'm in that place, if I decided to make a sound from the most relaxed I can be, that sound must be very close to a homeostasis state automatically. It's just that we've gone so far down the wrong pathways for generations and generations that we've so profoundly lost our touch of that place, that we now have to rely on external science and technologies like the heart rate variability to see what frequency makes this place so we can artificially sort of, find out what it is. So sort of what I'm really getting at is the part of this of what is health and disease, and part of what illness is. Part of it is my personal story, the traumas that have happened to me that I couldn't recover from before the next trauma happened, over and over and over and over and over again, until I'm just in this state of imbalance where my sympathetic is just on. And now I need some big time help in order to figure out how to push in the clutch again. And that's what I'm saying, that the biotuning system, I found a way of doing that using sound waves. And when I try to describe what I'm doing, really it's using vibrational therapy in a sound range, in a vibration frequency range that causes a measurable effect on a monitoring system that can tell me how my brain is working. I can watch, I can use technology to tell me what frequency to use. Then I can record your voice singing that, and I can build brain entrainment into that, because there's a relationship between brainwave frequencies and the sound that makes this happen. Because if I drop the octaves down further and further, some octaves I feel in my muscles, some I feel in my bones, some I feel in my fluids. Different octaves activate different body places. Octaves way down below hearing are brainwave frequencies, states of consciousness that make this happen in my mental body, in my emotional body in theta, in my physical body in delta, in my metaphysical body in epsilon, in gamma and default mode network, and all these other exotic brain states that are deeply associated with various types of healing, and each one associated with a different type of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So by using science to bear on sort of the scientific technology of meditation, that we bring it to a new level where I'm not floundering around trying to figure out, how am I supposed to meditate? What do I have to do? Do I have to sit in a monastery for 30 years on my butt to figure it out? Which is what it used to be, until the first monk came out from behind a monastery with the very first Tibetan bowl and rubbed that bowl. And all the monks went, oh my God, that cuts through everything. Puts me there like right now. All of a sudden, I just cut out 15 years of struggle to figure out what I'm supposed to do, because rubbing this bowl cuts through all the shit and all the noise and puts me smack dab in the middle of myself, right where I've been trying to get to. So instead of a Tibetan bowl, let's refine it. Let's make it your voice singing a very specific frequency that nails something happening. We've got all these cool, fancy schmancy tools. Let's use them.
And we have our voice all the time with us, so we can
we
use
always
it
had the
anytime.
voice. We just lost it of how to use that voice, because the esoteric secrets of meditation is using my voice to chant a certain frequency that resonates me from the inside out with a fundamental frequency that hits my note, that opens up all the doorways straight to the basement of my soul, where all my answers are.
That's
the answers
incredible.
of what I'm here for, the answers why I'm sick, the answer to all of it is there. And I've got a tool to get there. My voice singing a certain frequency. It's vibrational frequency in its purest form, right?
So I think that potentially, I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because it's a fun question. It's out of the box question that I ask every guest that comes to the show. And this is, if you were stuck on a desert island with an injury and you could bring only one thing to help you heal amazingly well, what would that be and why?
I'd bring a musical instrument of some kind.
Okay, so it wouldn't be just, I already have my voice, so I'm bringing that. It would be a tool that you can physically bring.
Usually the question is, what book would you bring? And the book would be the I Ching, oldest book of wisdom on earth, 5,000 years old. But if I had to bring a thing with me, I'd probably bring a replicator so I could make food. But if I brought a guitar or something, sooner or later those strings are going to break. Then I'm screwed anyway. So probably better to have a voice.
And then you have your voice. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we talked about so many things, and I know that we could talk even more. And all of this is so extremely fascinating. I learned so many new things today. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Now, what would be your number one advice that you would give someone who is recovering from any kind of physical trauma? If you would have to just say one thing in a few sentences to one person, what would that be?
The trauma is a message. It's not an accident. Everything is on purpose. And all of those things are on purpose are there to teach me something so I can start looking for opening doors. And big traumas is doors slamming in my face. It's there to stop me, to reevaluate everything. And the bottom line for me whenever I'm talking with patients was we've all been hypnotized into sort of believing that we're ordinary, that we're just ordinary Joe with a name and a job. And right, the rules are you get a job, you make money, you pay taxes, you save a little on the side, and you get married, you have kids, and you raise the kids, and that's it. In reality, we're on the biggest cosmic journey of all time. Each one of us is embarked on the great heroic journey to find out the true nature of my soul, why I'm here. That's my journey. And if I'm not on that journey, I'm wasting time over here. And that's why I'm sick. Mm-hmm. And the longer I'm here, my circle of elders will start throwing things at me to try to wake me up. They'll throw an accident at me and I'll break my leg. Maybe that'll wake them up, or I'll have a car accident or something to shake me up so I can get the point, get back on track, realize perhaps my job is killing me, or that I should go and take art classes instead of the MBA, Mm-hmm. And as crazy as it sounds of how am I going to make a living as an artist? I mean, right? I had those thoughts when I was going to art school in the 60s, but I didn't know what else to do, so I did that. Fortunately for me, and it turned out I've made a very good living as an artist. Thank you very much. It just wasn't the kind of artist I ever thought I was going to be. I mean, somehow art, music, sound waves, doctor with a clinic, all kind of morphed together somehow because I used my strong points and I figured out a way to weave them together. And that is the task for everyone. You have to find what are your strong points, what are your talents, and figure out a way to weave them together into a life story that's unique to you. That's where the millions will come from. I mean, you don't have to be a millionaire to be comfortable, to have enough. I've got beautiful stuff. I got wonderful keyboards. I've got a wonderful son who loves me. I've got a big clinic. I've got all these albums. I'm a musician. I'm somehow made it happen. And I'm not a multimillionaire, but I'm a happy person.
And that's the most important thing.
That's important. That's what's important.
Yeah. So, Dr. Jeff, I know there are so many people who would love to know more about you, contact you, get to your clinic. Where can people find that information?
Well, my website is scientificsounds.com. That'll be to the website and phone numbers and emails and contact information. I have a live stream that I did every Sunday for 2 years, wealth of information and a whole series of soundtracks. And that is https://bit.ly/Dr. Thompson live. DrThompsonLive. And the D and the T and the L are capitalized. Yeah. I'm open to questions or comments or whatever. I'm here for that.
Dr. Jeff, that was amazing. Like I said, I learned so many new things. Thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and for helping people heal amazingly well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode with Dr. Jeffrey Thompson. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review and subscribe if you haven't already. The Mindful Injury Recovery Talks are available on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict, and many other major streaming platforms. Also, if you'd like to learn more about using the mindful injury recovery method, either for yourself, a loved one, or as an addition to your own healing practice, make sure you check out my book Heal Beyond Expectations. It's available on Amazon, in paperback and Kindle, and it's a great extra healing resource. And if you would like to know how to work with me either one-on-one or through my self-paced programs, head over to my website mayanovak.com and discover more about these options.